So in this video, I want to talk about some books that I've read, I've implemented in my life that have made the biggest difference in the way that I live my life. In a very positive way. Like, these books have kind of shaped who I am now. A lot of these are books that I have mentioned before, and if you're a consistent badass babe, then you're probably going to recognize them, but I'll dive a little bit deeper into my history with them, which hopefully will be interesting. So the first book is The 12-Week Year. You guys, this book. So the book itself gets mixed reviews, but the actual process and some of the suggestions in the book have made the biggest difference in the past year of my life. So when I discovered this book, I actually listened to it on Blinkist. So I was just casually having a listen, and for whatever reason, it really struck a chord with me. A lot of it isn't revolutionary, it is stuff that you might have heard before, but sometimes you are in the right place at the right time listening to the right thing, and it's all just meant to be. I don't know what happened, but as soon as I listened to the Blinkist version of the book, I think in that week I was like to my sister, okay, we're doing weekly accountability meetings, and she was like, okay, let's do it. I actually don't think I even read the book until like halfway through our first little 3-month goal session, and to be completely honest, I don't follow the book to a T. The main thing in the book that's made the biggest difference in my life is probably just meeting with someone on a weekly basis and setting my goals in like 3-month intervals. And also they talk a lot about creating a vision for your life, which is talked about in so many places, but for whatever reason I read this book and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that, and it made the biggest difference in terms of like the clarity that I feel in my day-to-day life and knowing where I'm headed and having a vision for my life. It's huge. I was listening to a podcast the other day with not the author of the One Thing book, but the guy who does everything for the author of the One Thing book. And he talked about how sitting down with someone on a weekly basis and talking through your action items increases your chances of actually following through on your action items by 77%. Now, in a recent video, I also talked about the different personality types. So I think it depends on the type of personality you have. If you're like a rebel, then this may not work for you, but I know for me it works quite well because I think I'm actually an obliger/rebel. I'm pondering on it, I'm still working through it. There are just so many things in this book that have made such a massive difference in my life, particularly in the past like maybe 6 months in the start of this year. You guys have asked me to do a video on how this all works for us because we don't really do it to the book, and I do want to create that video. Hopefully it'll be coming your way in the future. The next book is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. We love some Brené Brown. So I actually read this book because it was in our Book Club for Babes book club, which is now closed down. It's all about the 12 guideposts to wholehearted living is what Brené Brown calls it. The whole book was really good, but the main part of the book that had the biggest impact on me was the practice of self-compassion. Self-compassion was something that I hadn't really heard about before. I didn't really know anything about it until reading this book, and it's had a huge impact on the way that I treat myself, or the way that I try to treat myself at all times. Self-compassion is similar to just compassion for another human being, but you have compassion for yourself, so you treat yourself like you would a friend. When you screw up, you talk to yourself like you would your best friend if she screwed up. It's about accepting your feelings rather than pushing them away. It's about not feeling bad about feeling bad, which you know is something that I preach a lot. I'm constantly going back to self-compassion in my life. It's like one of those journeys where you're always sort of veering off the path and then you have to get back on, especially when it's so ingrained in you not to treat yourself that way. If you want to learn more about self-compassion, I talked about it in my video on how to be nice to yourself. I'll have that linked up here and down below. And otherwise, read that book because it's had a really huge impact on the way that I talk to myself and treat myself. The next book is Deep Work. This is a recent one, so I feel a bit weird including it on my list because I read it so recently, as in like a few months ago. But this book has actually influenced me to make a few decisions in my life. It's influenced me to delete Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook since the start of the year. It's also influenced how I use Instagram, so I actually don't use Instagram for the majority of the week. I download it on certain days and then I'll upload a photo, and it's also made a huge difference in my productivity. So it's pretty much shaped the way that I schedule my weeks, which I talked about in my How to Stick to a Weekly Schedule video. In the book, Cal Newport talks about how we justify the use of social media tools because they have any benefits. So he talks about the any benefit method of choosing how to spend your time. But we don't really think about the downsides of social media. So we think, oh yeah, it keeps me connected, but we don't think of this list of bad things that is like yay long. We ask why not instead of why. And I think that was kind of the tipping point for me when it came to social media. So I found that book really influential on the way that I interact with social media in general, which seems small, but it's actually huge in terms of changing the way that I live my life. The next one, and this is the one that you would have expected, and that is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. This book has changed my life completely. If you didn't see this coming, like, hello, welcome to my channel. My name's Michelle B. The Life-Changing Magic was a book that I found when it was actually in its first wave of popularity, which was like 4 or 5 years ago. It was all over YouTube and social media, and now it's had a resurgence, which is amazing. If I was to point to any book that's been the most life-changing, it would be this one. I actually went through the Life-Changing Magic of tidying up, and then I created my own 30 Days to Simplify challenge, sort of based on the KonMari method, but in a bit more of a structured and guided way, because I found going through KonMari, I was kind of lost, and I was like, okay, what do I do next? Like, there's a whole section for, gosh, what is it? Miscellaneous things. So going through my own 30 Days to Simplify challenge was a huge game changer for me. After going through that, that was actually the year that I hit 100K on YouTube. It was the year that I felt like I finally found my personal style, which it took me so long to stumble into that. Like, I'd wanted that for a really long time. I saved a lot of money. I started falling in love with my space again. I started waking up at 5 a.m. Like, so many little changes I feel came as a result of that book. Not to say that book created all those changes, but it sort of was like the catalyst for change in my life. It's when my channel started heading in the direction that it is now. Before then, I was making like fashion and beauty content, which is absolutely wild to me to think back on. I don't really think that there's like a linear path to changing your life or living your life intentionally, but I do think that if you're gonna start somewhere, that is a really good place to start, by starting with my 30 Days to Simplify, or just the Life-Changing Magic of tidying up, like following the TV series and trying to do what she does. The next book is Getting Things Done by David Allen. You're probably getting a little bit sick of hearing me talk about this book because I feel like I've talked about it a lot recently for some reason, but it completely changed the game for me when it comes to task management. It introduced me to the brain dump, which is something that I do super regularly. It pretty much started the transformation of my weekly review and my weekly reset. The 2-minute rule is a game changer for productivity. And then there's one that actually isn't that popular of a concept, but I use it all the time. It's from GTD, and it is the natural planning method, which is all about how to plan your projects and new things that you want to do. If you want like an out-of-the-box productivity system, I would start here. I remember the first time reading it, I found it really difficult. It's actually written in quite a complex way. So I started reading it and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna put that to the side because that seems like a terrible book that I will never follow. Then I read it the second time and it clicked a little bit more. I forced myself to keep on reading, and then I read it the third time and then it really clicked and I got it. Although I think it's something that I could probably keep on reading and keep on learning things from. So that book has definitely changed the way that I think about task management. It's pretty much shaped the way that I manage my tasks and my productivity. If you liked this video, you might like my video on books that I am reading in 2019 to change my life. I will have that linked down below and on the screen. I appreciate you guys so much, and I will see you soon.